It's time for episode 3 of the Wizard101 Fanmade level 130 dungeon. This video will show off the third and final dungeon and complete the story. If you haven't seen the first two parts or need a refresher, go watch them now and come back to this video. Remember, all of the music, artwork, and ideas are owned by me and/or their respective creators. If you want to repost or use any of it, please contact me. Otherwise, any use of it without consent is stealing. Leaving a like, comment, as well as subscribing really means a lot to me, and perhaps I will create more content like this in the future. After this video, there will be one more video which will showcase the entire dungeon without any of my extra commentary. That video will be the closest to what it would be like to actually experience the dungeon in the game. In part 2, we defeated Hel, Fenrir, and Jormungandr, but at the cost of losing some allied gods. Now we venture to Asgard in order to stop Ragnarok once and for all. We now enter Asgard, the palace of the gods. Here in the hallway we are greeted by Heimdall.
Great wizard, I knew you were coming. I have seen all of your former victories, but we must put those behind us. This is the only battle that matters now. Take up arms, wizard. Now is the time to fight for the fate of the spiral.
Heimdall blows his great horn and the room trembles.
Heimdall is the watchman of the gods and sees all in the universe. He knows of your previous battles and accomplishments. Heimdall, in mythology, blows his great horn before the final battle of Ragnarok. The dungeon quest is called A Tangle with Shadow. We venture further into the castle and arrive at the armory.
You get to the armory and it's empty, but you feel as if someone is watching.
I know you are here. I see you and feel your presence. Make yourself known.
You're too late, fools. Ragnarok has come and it's impossible to stop. The greatest trick is hope, but there truly is none. It has been foretold that this will be the end of the spiral.
You are wrong, shapeshifter. For the glory of Asgard, the wizard shall defeat you, and peace will be restored.
Beat me? You can't beat me if you can't find me.
Here we meet the infamous trickster, Loki. I would be surprised if any of you didn't know about Loki, but he warns of Ragnarok and the danger against the gods. We now fight Loki, the first battle of the dungeon. Loki duplicates and creates 3 versions of himself that fill 3 slots of the battlefield. Each Loki is Moon School with an unknown amount of health, 100% damage, 100% pierce, and 25% resist. In reality, each Loki has 45,000 health, but this is hidden. Loki is known for transformations and illusions. The Moon School is all about polymorphs, and that fits Loki perfectly. We also gave Loki a crazy amount of pierce, 100%, will basically be neglecting all of your resist. Loki having pierce also makes sense with his trickery and tendency to stab people in the back. Loki casts spells like Shadow Shrike, Shift Rattlebones, Shift Dread Paladin, and Shift Bunferatu. One of the 3 Loki decoys is the real one, and when you kill the right one, the battle will end. If you kill a decoy instead, Loki will say, "Missed me!" A bubble is put up that dispels all AoE spells. This does not take pips. When a wizard casts an AoE and fizzles, Loki will say,
"It's not going to be that easy."
This makes it a guessing game of sorts. You can hit the right Loki on the first turn and kill him quickly, or it could take you 3 separate hits to find the right Loki and move on. If Loki is not killed in one hit, he will fully heal himself off Minor Blessing.
You're going to have to be better than that.
Loki isn't the only thing in the battle though. Heimdall has a different mechanic from other gods that fight beside you. Instead of giving you plus and minus stats, he actually takes part in the fight, filling the 4th slot in the battlefield. Heimdall is myth and has 35,000 health. Heimdall casts spells that help the wizard like Blade Storm, Tower Shield, Shatter, Pierce, Clem's Charm, Cleanse Ward, Guidance, Brilliant Light, Hex, and Curse. Heimdall has interesting mechanics through the fight. While he appears in an enemy slot, he is beguiled in the sense that you can still see his cards, and his cards can be cast on you. This being said, he isn't beguiled in the sense that you can still hit him with attacks. This is where the fight gets real interesting. If Heimdall is hit, and he must be killed in one shot, he will leave the battlefield and the true Loki will have his health revealed.
I see through your trickery.
If Heimdall is not killed in one hit, he will Minor Blessing and fully heal himself.
Wizard, to win you are going to have to hit harder than that.
Besides that, if a fate is placed on Loki, he'll put a 125% trap on the caster.
I sharpen my knives.
This means that you can fate, but only if you're willing to get a large trap on you as well. The Loki battle might be one of the coolest fights we have designed. Not only is there a mechanic where you have to kill the right Loki to move on, and you can only hit one at a time, but there's also a character on the other team that assists you in battle. Loki doesn't have many cheats, his high pierce will do lots of damage, so make sure you have lots of shields and heals ready. Also, fates are risky in terms of getting a trap placed back on yourself. Besides those killing in one hit and not be able to cast AoE spells, this battle has few cheats. Regardless, there is still strategy, and possibly more than any other fight in the entire game. Do you take the chance and guess on a Loki? That leaves you with a 1 in 3 chance of getting it right. If you're wrong, you now have a 50-50 chance with the 2 remaining Lokis. If you were wrong again, it took you 3 separate hits to finish this battle. But you could have also killed the Loki on the first or second hit if you were lucky. Not only that, but if you hit Heimdall first, he will reveal the true Loki and you are guaranteed to kill on the second hit. Does your team take the gamble, or do they take the guaranteed second hit kill? That is what makes this battle interesting. Loki doesn't drop anything, besides the platinum keys.
How? It's not possible.
He saw through your facade, you scoundrel. Wizard, it has been an honor.
We defeat Loki, but Heimdall dies in the battle as well. Remember in part 2 when I said all the gods and their enemies kept slaying each other? Yeah, this trend continues here. We move forward in the dungeon and fight off against 4 Realm Walkers. These minions aren't anything special and each have 20,000 health. There are different schools being Ice, Life, Balance, and Storm. We only see a few worlds of Norse mythology, and these giant minions represent the other worlds that this story wasn't able to explore. They also have school typings that this dungeon hasn't seen quite as much. After you defeat the minions, you can do 2 things. One is continue through the dungeon, the other is to use a skeleton key to access a platinum key room. Let us go into skeleton key room first. In this room, the Well of Knowledge, we are met by a new figure.
Hello, gentle wizard. They call me Mamere. I hear of everything that happens in the spiral, and I have been told many stories of your triumphs. You have even met a bear named after me. He drank from my well of knowledge and made one of his own. The great Odin also sacrificed his eye to drink from my well. Join me in battle and prove your worth. In victory, the gift of knowledge is yours.
This is the true Mamere. As he explains, the one in Grizzleheim shares his name and took after him by making his own well in Wintertusk. We wanted to add Mamere for a few reasons. We thought we could make some cool cheats around him, and his lore is interesting. We now enter the battle and face Mamere. Mamere is a boss without minions and stands on his own. He is balanced with 70,000 health, 100% damage, 25% pierce, and 25% resist. He knows spells like Gaze of Fate, Mana Burn, Supernova, Loremaster, Raw, and Nested Fury. Mamere also has 7 power pips and 7 shadow pips, meaning he has max pips at all times. Because of this, on the first round he will say,
There is little left to learn.
Mamere and his well hold infinite knowledge, and his cheats reflect that. His health and abundance of pips show that he has been battling for a long time and has mastery over spells. Mamere really only has 1 cheat, but it's a big cheat. Mamere has a bubble up that dispels all spells already cast, only by the wizards. On the first round he puts this bubble up, he will say,
I remember all that came before.
This cheat only affects your spells. If you or your team casts a spell, you can't cast it again. If Mamere casts a spell, you can still cast that same spell again. Spells that Mamere casts won't count towards the wizards. Basically, what Mamere does doesn't matter at all in this cheat, and it doesn't apply to him. That being said, let's go back to what happens if you trigger the cheat. If you cast a spell that was already casted by you or another wizard, you will fizzle, taking your pips.
That magic has had its time.
Of course, you cannot change the bubble, and an enchanted version, item version, or TC version of a spell is still the same spell. This means that if you cast a Stormblade, you cannot cast a Sharpened Stormblade, Item Stormblade, or TC Stormblade. If the spell has the same name, it's the same spell. But that's it for Mamere cheats. It's really only that one and the fact that he always has max pips. Defeating Mamere will give the wizards the badge, the Rememberer. and Mamere drops the decks, like the Platinum Key Chest in Helheim, along with a new pet and a new mount. Before we talk drops, let's quickly analyze this fight. I'm a big fan of 3 Jades and 1 hitter on a team. For this boss though, I think that more than 1 hitter would be ideal, since you can only cast each blade, trap, or hit once. Also make sure you have different shields and heals for Mamere. Again, this fight isn't super hard at its core, but really has interesting cheats that make you approach the boss in a new way. I love this fight and the Loki fight for these reasons. They aren't just, you can't feint, or he takes off blades every 4 rounds. These fights use mechanics already in the game and take them to a new level and add depth and creativeness to the battle. But back to the drops. The decks were shown earlier, so we're going to skip over those. Let's start with the mount. The mount is Odin's trusty steed, Sleipnir. Sleipnir is an 8-legged horse, and because of this he's able to run at massive speeds, now being the fastest mount in the game at 60% movement speed. Sleipnir is an easy choice for a cool mount, and even another child of Loki. This horse is also described as the best of all horses. Besides that, we have a new pet. This pet is Sol, the embodiment of the sun. It manifests into a cute little firefox that runs along beside you. This is a sun school pet, and gives a spell called Sol Reborn. This spell is a sun spell. Like the pet, it takes 3 pips to deal 550 AoE damage. The spell then removes a pip from each enemy. Now, I know what you might be thinking. This spell seems a bit bloated for a 3-pip AoE. In reality, this pet is really only good at lower levels. 3 pips could be 3 new pips or 3 power pips, and 3 power pips is the equivalent of casting a 6-pip spell. The spell also deals sun damage, a type of damage that only gets boosted by universal gear, blades, and traps. Since it's a pet spell, it also cannot be enchanted. With this said, this spell is good for lower level characters before they get access to regular AoE spells and the ability to enchant. We now look at the animation for the spell.
The spell starts as the sun appears. The sun morphs into the firefox we know as Sol. A close-up from above on Sol as she starts to spin in a circle, almost chasing her tail. Beams of sun start to emit from Sol. They move forward and hit the enemies, exploding on impact. Each enemy then loses 1 pip.
And that is the Sol pet, its spell and its animation. Now we are going to leave Mamere's Well and continue through the dungeon to the final boss of the whole expansion. We enter the throne room of the gods and are greeted by our final enemy.
You are too late, wizard. The gods had their chance, and they brought ill fate to the spiral. Now is the time for all of the worlds to burn.
Not if we have anything to say about it.
The worlds will fall. It is the spiral's destiny. You may try to stop me, wizard, but you cannot stop fate. Fire will engulf the spiral. Fall to the flames of Ragnarok.
The dungeon quest is called The Burning Giant. Surtur is a giant of fire and the ultimate bringer of Ragnarok. He is destructive and powerful, but also understanding in a way that other villains are not. He isn't trying to destroy the spiral because he is just evil, but because it was foretold and he must fulfill his destiny. It is time to fight Surtur and prevent Ragnarok. Surtur is, of course, a fire boss. He has 100,000 health, 100% damage, 25% pierce, and 25% resist. He is also accompanied by 3 fire realm walkers, who each have 20,000 health. Surtur casts spells like Meteor Strike, a 30% fire blade storm, Fiery Giant, Raging Bull, Sun Serpent, Lava Lord, and Lava Leviathan. These are classic spells from other schools that are now engulfed in the fire that is Ragnarok. Freyr helps you in this fight by giving you 15% damage and 15% incoming healing. That's right, Freyr has 2 buffs for the wizard with no drawbacks. This is because Freyr is loved by all and is the god of prosperity and peace. In this final hour, he is doing everything in his power to stop Ragnarok. A fire bubble for 25% fire damage is always up, which will show ash constantly raining from the sky. On the first round, when the bubble goes up, Surtur will say,
"Let the worlds burn."
Of course, there's no way to take this bubble down. If a blade is cast on yourself, Surtur will steal it.
Thank you for fueling my fire.
If this is a blade with more than 1 blade, like Elemental or Spirit Blade, he will steal them all. If a damage over time spell is cast on Surtur, he will transfer it back on the caster and detonate the dot.
Ragnarok waits for no such foolery.
At 5 Shadow Pips, Surtur will cast a 3000 true damage meteor to all that also acts as an earthquake.
My turn to swing my sword.
None of these cheats can be dispelled or worked around in any way. Surtur is tough. He and his minions do lots of damage, but in reality his cheats are not too crazy. Make sure you do not blade yourself or cast the dot. And hit and have some heals ready at 5 Shadow Pips because he will do 3000 true damage to everyone, and this acts as an earthquake, taking off all your blades and traps. Surtur seems defeated, but like any good boss, he has a second phase. Now Surtur, like a fire, grows in enormous size. Gone are the 4 battle slots for enemies, and Surtur takes the place as one giant boss. This version of Surtur is engulfed in flames and is the true final part of Ragnarok.
You cannot stop destiny. The spiral will burn.
This Surtur is fire and shadow. He has 500,000 health, 150% damage, 50% pierce, and 50% resist. He casts spells like Meteor, a 50% Fire Blade, Fiery Giant, Raging Bull, Sun Serpent, Lava Lord, and Lava Leviathan. Yes, these are basically the same spells as before. If you die to Surtur in this phase and your team loses, you will have to come back to fight the first form of Surtur again, along with his enemy minions. Freyr helps you in this fight too, with the same 15% damage and 15% incoming healing. In this stage, however, Freyr will also cast a 25% Blade Storm every 5 rounds. After the 25th round, these Blade Storms will only be 10%. Surtur will put dots on each wizard that never leave and do 500 true damage a turn, and cannot be triaged.
This is the end.
This sounds super unfair. Every turn you take 500 damage no matter what? In reality, you're only fighting one enemy, which means that only one enemy is casting spells at you a turn. This is just a clever way to keep the pressure on and still have the boss deal damage. If a dot is placed on Surtur, he will do the same thing as before and place it on the caster and detonate it.
Ragnarok waits for no such foolery.
If Surtur gets hit and isn't killed in one hit, he will put a healing dot on himself for 50,000 true healing a turn until he is healed. At full health, this will be taken off, and of course, you cannot steal this heal. He will also put a juju on the hitter who failed to kill him.
You cannot extinguish the fire.
If a feint is placed on Surtur, he will move it to the caster and then cast a Fire Judgment for 100 damage per pip.
My fire burns brighter.
Indemnity and Mass Feint won't trigger the movement or judgment, and are viable ways to get around this cheat. On the 26th round, Surtur will take off every blade, trap, and shield, and will hit with an enchanted meteor for 1,200 true damage.
The end of Ragnarok is almost upon us.
If you don't kill Surtur after 50 rounds, on the 51st round, he will hit everyone for almost 1,000,000 true damage.
You have run out of time, wizard. It is over.
And that is it if you can believe it. This fight is meant to be hard and takes lots of planning and a little luck. Defeating Surtur will grant the badge Ragnarok Reborn, and he drops the hats, robes, boots, and wands. This fight is hard, and is supposed to be. Surtur is only one person to fight, but has some difficult cheats. A dot that hits for 500 every round is fairly hard to deal with. On this note, there is no fire bubble, so Sanctuary is a must for heals. Surtur has to be killed in one hit. If you don't, he will heal for 50,000 a turn and put a juju on your hitter. You can feint Surtur with an indemnity, or even twice if you have a mass feint too. Freyr will help with blades every few rounds, but once the fight gets to the 25th round, you should hopefully have killed by then. Here Surtur will do lots of damage and take off every blade, trap, and shield of yours. If you don't kill by 50 rounds, the run is over, kind of like the final battle of Polaris. This fight is difficult in the sense that it will take lots of teamwork and a very strong hit, but the cheats don't really limit the type of spells you can play. Surtur is a boss who, like fire, grows and gets even more difficult to handle. Not only does he have a second form, but the dots that hit every round and a ticking clock until the 26th and 51st rounds really add to the tension of the fight. Let's talk hats first. As for the other gear in the dungeons, we made sets for Storm and Life. Not only is there one set that Surtur drops, but two. Each school has two sets of hats, robes, boots, and wands. One set is the Odin set, a set more well-rounded, defensive, and utility, and the other set is the Loki set, a set based on more all-out attack and damage. Going completely one set or the other might be a good call, or perhaps pairing a little bit of both might give you the ideal stats you want. We want to make it so no set was clearly the best set in the game. Now before we talk gear, understand two things. One is that we are clearly not game developers. As you have seen, we have done our best to make things that are challenging, fun, and new in this dungeon, but admittedly some gear or bosses might be too broken or difficult. We didn't have the time or resources to run all the numbers and just did the best we can. The second point to keep in mind is that our project has taken a while. Some of this gear, specifically the wands, might not be exactly as we intended while creating them, because we planned some of this stuff almost a year ago. Back then we had no clue about Grizzleheim Horde gear being based on Odin, but that there would be new wands like the Sinbad anchors that would be so strong. That being said, I hope you enjoy the gear and what we have to show. Back to the hats, and since there are 16 pieces of gear here, I'm going to go through them fairly quickly, so if you want to look in depth, just pause the video. The first hats shown are Odin's Helm of the Sky and Loki's Horns of Storm. As we go through gear, take a look at the names because we spent a good amount of time coming up with cool stuff for the gear to be called. Notably, Odin's hat gives resist and a little more utility in places like pips, but Loki's hat gives more damage and more critical. This is going to be the theme. Let's look at the life hats now. Odin's Wings of Nature and the Horns of the Accursed One. Differences in these hats are similar to those in Storm, except more catered to life of course. Now we move on to the Storm's robes. There's Odin's Robe of Rain and the Trickster's Cloudy Tunic. Odin's robe seems more like a complete upgrade to Malistaire, which is now 30 levels out of date. Why isn't there a better robe for Storm already? And Loki's robe goes down in stats like accuracy and resist, but has larger boost in damage and critical. The Odin robes for both schools give a tower shield, and the Loki robes for both schools give a spear. We now move on to the life robes. These are the Leaf Storm garment of the Allfather and the vestment of the Trickster's Thorns. These are similar upgrades in stats. Perhaps for life it's better to wear the Odin robe, and maybe for Storm wants more of the Loki style. Moving on to the boots. Storm gets the Tempest Striders of the Cosmic King, along with the Trickster's boots of Silent Thunder. Loki's shoes come with more damage and critical, but lose important stats like block and resist. Life Wizards get Sanctuary boots of Odin's Might and Loki's Infected boots. These have similar stat differences to the Storm ones. The ones where some of the gear gets really fun. Again, this gear was created 8 months ago, and new stuff has been added by then, so it might be a little out of date, but here it is. Storm gets Gungnir of Stormy Runes alongside the Daggers of the Howling Wind. These wands are quite different. Odin's wand has crit and block in his upgrade of Terra's Horde gear. Loki's wand is more like the Paradox wand, except with more critical and more damage, and is less utility like Pierce and Pip Convert. Both wands come with spells, but before we discuss those, let's show the life wands. Life has the Gungnir of Lively Runes and the Daggers of the Hidden Forest. We want to make wands that were both good and farmable without spending money. Almost every worthwhile endgame wand is only attainable by purchasing packs. While I get this is the way that KingsIsle makes money, there should be viable wands that players without as much spendable money can still get. The spells in the wands are Maycasts. Odin's wand may cast a star spell, Cosmic Allfather. This spell does 600 true damage and gives your team a 35% Legion shield. Odin possesses great knowledge and power in the universe, and is both offensive and defensive in his battle strategy. He also is the king of the gods and has power beyond the wizards, therefore dealing true damage.
For the animation of this spell, Odin travels down in a flash of light that is the Bifrost. He steps out and is surrounded by the stars. He points his powerful spear Gungnir at the enemy and shoots a beam that damages them for 600 true damage. A Legion shield is then put on the wizard and their team as the spell fades away into the stars.
For this and the Loki spell, we want to make them cool and unique, yet fast. Maycast spells shouldn't take as long in their animations as a real hit. Loki's spell is Moon. This spell is Apocalyptic Trickster and does 800 damage, steals a blade, and puts on a weakness. Loki, as we know, is devious. He deals higher damage, although it isn't true damage, and is a thief that steals a blade. He also finds people's misery amusing, so that was the inspiration for the weakness.
Loki's animation starts with a horse walking in. This horse then transforms into a snake. The snake transforms to reveal it was, of course, Loki. Loki laughs and then poof, goes invisible. He reappears behind the enemy and stabs them in the back. After that, Loki vanishes again.
As you can see, we put Loki's knack for backstabbing, transformation, and trickery into this spell. In lore, he is the father of Sleipnir because he had transformed himself into a horse and then had a child. This horse transformation in the spell is a nod to that. This snake is a nod to Loki's personality, along with his transformation to a snake in Thor Ragnarok. And that is the end of the Surtur fight and the gear he drops.
We have done it, Wizard. Although I fear we are too late. The spiral burns and we couldn't stop it. Here I will lay and leave this mortal form. This truly is beautiful.
You see, Wizard, no matter how well you fought, sometimes failure is inevitable. But don't feel bad, for out of the ashes the spiral will be reborn. These new worlds, pure and saved. There will be a time of peace and happiness. You have my respect, Wizard. When Ragnarok is done, the spiral will be renewed. This is the classic cycle of life. The old must give way to the new. Death must give way to life. Know that even though you failed here, the spiral lives on.
Freyr dies and Surtur wins. The spiral is engulfed in flames, but like a phoenix, it will be reborn from the ashes. This, like Xibalba, is a rare time where the wizard loses. However, Yggdrasil and the spiral are reborn. We then leave the dungeon now and talk to Rat on Yggdrasil one last time.
You're back! If everything you say is true, then there is more trickery to be had after all. Even though the world is on fire, we will be alright. Maybe you should talk to the gods. They will be partying in Valhalla, even though they lost. See you around, Wizard. There is more gossip to be spread.
We now venture up to Valhalla. Here you are met by the deceased gods who welcome you.
Welcome, great wizard. We all know of your triumphs here today. The spiral will be reborn, and your failure will not be held against you. Now is the time to celebrate among fellow warriors. For your bravery and sacrifice, we grant you the power to summon us in battle.
This is it, the time you get your spell. Before we start, depending on your school, a character will talk to you and give you that spell. As I look back on these spells, some of them are not quite balanced. We really just wanted to add new mechanics and interesting ways to use spells in the game. All of these spells are 4 pips and 2 shadow pips.
I offer you my hand in helping, Wizard. Together we shall bring balance back to the spiral.
This is the balance spell, and it is called Lawbringer. This spell either hits an enemy for 1200 or can put a 50% blade on an ally and completely cleanse them. The caster must choose one or the other. The hit functions as any hit, but if they decide to cast on a teammate, it will apply the blade, which can be sharpened, and cleanse any effects on that wizard like beguile, stuns, traps, weaknesses, etc. Balance is versatile. They both attack and defend, and this spell gives you an option with how to use it. The cleanse is strong if a juju, stun, or feint is casted on your ally, and not to mention it comes with a 50%, 60% if sharpened, blade, which is the highest in the game. Of course, as strong as the spell is, it does take 2 shadow pips.
In the damage animation, Tyr will exit a lodge. He raises his axe in a battle stance and strikes with a shield blow, then slashing his axe overhead. After this, he fades. With the defensive animation, he will exit the lodge and then turn toward the wizard. He raises his axe, and energy starts to swirl. He points his axe at the wizard, and they are cleansed, and a blade is put on them.
Since Tyr's spell has 2 animations, we wanted to keep it fairly simple. He also is a balance spell, so we thought he would fight more with his weapon than with magic.
Wizard, you truly have earned our respect. I, the mighty Thor, will be honored to slay beasts by your side.
The next spell is Storm Spell, and this is Thunder's Hammer. I figured I should mention that we came up with the spell almost a year ago, so long before we knew of the Griselheim pack. And yes, it does have a way better animation than a stupid hammer falling from the sky. Seriously though, that spell just looks lazy. Thor's spell does 1,950 damage, but at the cost of being stunned for 2 rounds. Indeed, this is the highest damaging spell in the game, and enchanted it does quite a bit over 2000 damage. On the flip side, it does take 2 Shadow Pips, which are annoyingly hard to get sometimes, and also stuns the casting wizard for 2 rounds after. It also isn't an AoE spell, so keep that in mind. By the way, a good application for the balance spell is to cleanse your storm of the double stun after they cast this.
The animation for the spell starts with a pan up from the battlefield as thunderclouds roll in. In a flash of lightning, reveals the silhouette of Thor spinning his hammer. From a shot above Thor, we see him bringing his hammer back and then drive it downward. He then flies down and slams his hammer on the enemy with great force and lightning erupting from it. The wizard who casted gets stunned for 2 rounds and Thor flies away.
This is one of the coolest spells we made. When I say the Thor hammer spell currently in the game is lazy, this is why. This spell is just so cool, from the lightning that reveals Thor spinning his hammer in the clouds, to the dive and smash of power that he hits the enemy with. This spell does the most damage in the game, and we really wanted to convey that.
Word from the highest mountains echoes in your accomplishments. You will make a fine hunting companion.
Skadi is the ice spell, and her spell is called Hunter of the Peak. This spell puts on a 50% pierce on the wizard, and then does 1200 damage. This acts like the Queen Calypso spell, where the buff goes on first, and then the spell uses that buff almost immediately after. This spell seems strong, and to be honest, every spell that this dungeon gives is pretty strong. Numbers aside, we wanted each spell to be new and unique, and have its own identity. Skadi is an expert hunter, so she would be able to hit any prey's weak spot, hence the pierce.
In Skadi's animation, we start with a view of the mountain. Skadi then starts to ski down. She gets closer and breaks in the snow. The wizard gets their pierce blade, which is immediately taken off, and Skadi shoots an ice arrow, dealing damage. She then fades away.
Not much to say about this spell, other than we wanted to make sure Skadi was an expert hunter and skier.
Your aura shines bright, my friend. You have my aid in battle.
This is the fire spell, Gracious Light. And yes, this is the god Baldur from the beginning of the story that Baldur Goldpaws is named after, and told us died. This spell is an AoE fire spell with 1000 damage, and then a Beguile on 1 person for a round. We wanted Baldur's infectious light to affect all. He's loved by everyone and has a glowing presence, so that is why his spell is an AoE. We also played a bit into the handsome bachelor factor that he seems to have, and that is why he has the power to woo an enemy onto his side for 1 round.
Baldur's animation starts with a flash of light, with Baldur emerging glowing. Baldur winks at the mobs and his outer glow expands, hitting all of the enemies and dealing damage. Then, the mob the wizard picked gets a rose actually tossed at them and they are beguiled. Baldur then disappears in another flash of glowing light.
This spell is just as amazing as the Thor spell, but for other reasons. Instead of the epic power that Thor had, this spell is comical and fun. Not only is Baldur the representation of the perfect man who is literally glowing, but he also has the power to wink and make that glow of handsomeness overwhelming enough to deal damage. Not to mention the way he nonchalantly throws the rose at an enemy as if he is the coolest guy ever. I find this spell to be hilarious and super fun at the same time, and we wanted that artistic difference. For every spell like Thor that is epic and powerful, there should also be another spell just as interesting but with a different take.
You shake the earth with your presence, wizard. The aura of death follows you like no other. The souls of living shall be ours.
Death spell is next and is called Hidden Death. Now looking back on this spell, it's crazy OP. It would need some adjusting, but let's talk about it. This spell does 1250 damage to 1 enemy and saps a quarter of their health, healing the casting player. Any part of the heal above full health gives them an absorb shield. Thematically, this fits Hel in her collection of souls. Balance-wise, if you were to hit a boss for 20,000 damage, which isn't difficult at all, the wizard would have around a 5,000 absorb. That's broken. If I were to adjust it now, I would put something like a 1,500 shield cap, or perhaps make the heal like a 10th instead of a 4th. Regardless, this dungeon is less about the numbers and more about the general idea, but I figured I should mention this before I get called out in the comments.
This animation starts with a creepy fog emitting from the ground. We see the back of Hel and some braziers start to rise from the fog. The camera shows Hel, but then she turns and reveals her zombie face. Hel steps forward and steals the soul of the enemy, channeling it into her hand. She then slams the health on the floor, lighting the braziers around her. She gestures at the wizard and the health braziers swirl around the player and heals them. Hell then descends back into the fog, leaving an empty battlefield with just her echoing laughter.
Like Thor and Baldur, this spell is amazing. It is epic from the fog to the zombie face reveal, the slamming of health into the ground, and even the creepy echoing laughter as she leaves. Spells should be cool, fun, and satisfying to cast. A wizard player sees the same spell hundreds of times. Think Tempest. And every spell should either be short and sweet, or, if longer, epic enough that it is fun to watch every single time. Nobody likes spells like Ra, Old Cthulhu, or Forest Lord that feels like they take hours to cast and have fairly basic animations that are held for far too long.
I see many things, young one. Your future will be bright, and I am here if you are ever in need of assistance.
This spell is called the Call of Galahorn. This spell takes off all shields from the enemy, then hits for 1000 damage. It then lets the wizard and their team see all enemy spells for one turn. Let me explain. If I cast this spell on an enemy, the first thing it's going to do is take off every shield like a shatter. Heimdall sees all, and he sees his enemy's weaknesses in battle. He then hits the enemy for damage. After this, he reveals the enemy cards for next round. Think Arcane Deduction, or like how you see enemy spells with Beguile. Again, this is because Heimdall has the power to see every little thing in the universe.
This animation starts with a view of the spiral. It zooms out to reveal that the spiral was in Heimdall's eye. We then see all of Heimdall. He blows his horns, which activates Shatter on the mobs. Heimdall strikes with his sword, dealing damage. After that, his eyes glow, and the enemy attacks can now be seen.
The shot to the spiral in his eye is a perfect representation of what I was talking about when Heimdall sees all. The spell is fairly simple after that, but gets on with its animation quickly. Let's move on to the last spell of the dungeon.
You fight with honor, wizard. My sister and I will help you bring beauty and life to the spiral.
This spell is called Lord and Lady of Life. It includes both Freyr and his sister Freya. This spell is a healing spell that first applies a 50% incoming healing trap on one selected ally and then heals all for 1100. We made another healing spell because life needs it. Besides Pigsy and Rebirth, because why would anyone use Unicorn when Pigsy exists, there's a lack of AoE healing with big impact. Also, life doesn't have a shadow heal, and this is the perfect opportunity. Not to mention, we all know my opinion on life hitters. Regardless, this spell works much like Queen Calypso or the Scotty Ice spell, where the buff goes on just to be taken off moments later. In this case, the casting wizard chooses who to put the 50% incoming healing trap on. Most of the time I only carry Pigsy, but one wizard, usually the Storm, has taken lots more damage than the other wizards in the battle. This spell would allow life wizards to heal everyone, but also heal that Storm wizard for even more.
This spell starts in a beautiful forest clearing, showing Freyr's famous shining boar, Gulenbursti. Out into the clearing steps Freya and Freyr. Freyr points his sword at a specific wizard, and that wizard gets a healing trap. Freya's Bersingamen necklace starts to glow, and the petals levitate off the forest floor. They then swirl around the wizards and heal them at the same time. The petal storm grows around the siblings, and a large petal flies toward the camera, covering it and ending the spell.
Life in nature's beauty is prevalent in the animation. Also, the idea of flower petals in a healing spell has not really been seen before and would look amazing with all of the different colors.
Go on, young one. Tell the mortals of what you have done here. We will watch your future with great interest.
Now we got our school spell, and the only thing left to do is talk to Baldur Goldpaws, so we head back to Old Town.
Bless the Aesir, you have returned. You have done well, wizard, and are truly a champion of Grizzleheim and the realms beyond. Remember, a wise warrior never seeks out war, but must always be ready for it.
And with that, we get the badge Valkyrie of Valhalla, and the level 130 dungeon that was Ragnarok is over.
We will stand, we will fight, we'll take everything we need. We won't lay down and die, this is who we are meant to be. There's no second guessing, yeah, we're gonna ignored us like we're a passing fad. But then we raised our voices, and now you're scared of all the power that we have. We're coming for ya. Now you can't ignore us. We will stand, we will fight, we'll take everything we need. We won't lay down and die. This is who we are meant to be. There's no second guessing, yeah, we're gonna wear the crown. 'Cause we will stand, we will fight, we won't stop until you all see we're the new kings. We're the new kings. You call yourselves an army. You try to hold us back, but when the battle's over, you're gonna see all the power that we have. We will stand, we will fight, we'll take everything we need. We won't lay down and die. This is who we are meant to be. There's no second guessing, yeah, we're gonna wear the crown. 'Cause we will stand, we will fight, we won't stop until you all see we're the new kings. We're the new kings. We're coming for ya. Yeah, we're coming for ya. No, you can't ignore like you did before. 'Cause we're coming for ya. We will stand, we will fight, we'll take everything we need. We won't lay down and die. This is who we are meant to be. There's no second guessing, yeah, we're gonna wear the crown. 'Cause we will stand, we will fight, we won't stop until you all see we're the new kings. We're the new kings. We're the new kings now. We're the new kings. We're the new kings.
Thank you all so much for watching this series. There's one more video to go up, and that is the video with the complete dungeon with all of my extra commentary taken out. I hope you enjoyed the dungeon. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions or comments, you can put them here in the comment section below, or perhaps on one of my social medias. One last reminder that all of the music, artwork, and ideas are owned by me and/or their respective creators. If you want to repost or use any of it, please contact me. Otherwise, any use of it without consent is stealing. With that in mind, we have ideas for other projects like this, key bosses, even a complete new world. But this project has taken hours of my time and lots of my money, so something like this isn't guaranteed to happen again. Thank you guys for watching. Please check out my artists and some of my other videos, or my Twitch stream. And with that, have a great day.